And good evening. Today we're going to go over Module 4, Religion in Schools for School Law. So, the background of the debate and the purpose of this presentation. The information for this report, of course, will come from two main sources, the Pew Research Center and the USDE guidance report. And the purpose of this report is to, of course, look at refreshing or updating school board policy on religion in schools. First off, religion and government, a few key abbreviations. ESEA is, of course, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It was passed here recently. Also, you have your LEA, your Local Education Authority, and your SEA, your State Educational Authority. So kind of just to knock out some of those abbreviations for everybody. Basically, this statement here means that in order to receive funds from the national government of schools, schools must show that they make no rules to stop students and staff from prayer in public schools, as long as it falls within the rules established by the government, which is what the bulk of this presentation is going to go over to make sure that we are, as a district, in line with those principles. So, religion and government. First Amendment of the Constitution, of course, which the Supreme Court has held both prevents the governments from establishing religion as part of the Freedom of Religion Act. It also requires public school officials to show that neither favoritism nor hostility against religious expression, such as prayer, and that goes for any religion, of course. So, how does this directly influence in schools? Religion lessons during school. Of course, public schools may not provide religious instruction, but they may teach about religion. So what does that mean? That means that I cannot, as a social studies teacher, provide direct scripture or anything like that, but I can go into things like what's the difference between a monotheistic and a polytheistic religion, as well as maybe highlight the 5 pillars of Islam or the historical significance of the Reformation as an attempt to better educate students in terms of those things. I know that as I taught this subject here recently with the 5 pillars of Islam, I had to go over that because I had a student in class who asked why his cousin, who is Islamic, was fasting. So I had to go over what Ramadan was. Of course, this is backed by the court case McCollum versus Board of Education. As you can see, most of my resources will be listed as this way. So as you go through, if you feel free the need to pause, as I will not be covering all of the court cases there at the bottom, it will allow you to look at those court cases as we go through. Now, secondly, public schools can excuse students during the school day so they can attend religious classes away from school property, because that does not interfere with their religion, and it does not enforce and make others accompany to learning about that religion. So if a student wants to be pulled out to receive separate tutorage on the Bible or the Quran or the Torah, they are perfectly well within their rights and should be allowed to do so as well. Now, prayer in school-sponsored prayer, of course, even non-sectarian prayer violates that establishment clause, which we discussed at the very beginning. That means that as a school, we cannot require people to pray. We cannot have prayers over the loudspeakers. We cannot pray before football games as a public school to receive funding. So in order to do that, we may have a moment of silence, which we'll get into that later. Okay. We, however, cannot stop students to pray on their own time if they so choose. Now, school-sponsored prayer led by invited clergymen at a public school commencement is not allowed. We cannot invite members of a religious sect to come in and officiate a commencement address and have them pray beforehand, because that will, of course, kind of put some people in awkward situations if they are not a follower of that religion, and have to have them opt out of such an important ceremony would be, to be blunt, horrible. Moments of silence. Now, if a school, as we have had in the past, decides to have a moment of silence, okay, then what those students do and teachers do at that time during that moment of silence is pretty much none of our business, to be bluntly honest. If they choose to pray at that time, they can pray at that time. If they choose not to pray at that time and sit in silence and reverence, then they can absolutely do that. Okay, and we cannot force them to do one or the other. No school shall be able to teach about intelligent design as well. I know that has been an issue here in the state of Kansas, but intelligent design has been linked and directly tied to religious theories. So, with it being linked and directly tied to religious theories, it is not allowed to be taught in school, even if we do teach evolution as well. Evolution is a scientific topic, therefore it is acceptable to be taught in the classroom, especially in science classrooms, but we cannot teach intelligent design because it is a backed religious theory. Holiday programs and dress. Of course, no student shall be forced to sing anything or play anything that violates their religion. As well, that also goes for any books, any readings, anything like that. They are free to opt out. We cannot, however, and may not single out any religious attire in general. We may not have them change. We may not make them change if they are wearing something that is up to their religious code. So if a young lady wants to wear a hijab in school, we cannot and will not require her to take that off. If a young male of the Jewish faith wants to wear a yarmulke, he can absolutely wear a yarmulke. There is no violation. If we violate those rights, then we are in some trouble there. Now, group gatherings. Students may organize prayer groups just like anybody else. They can organize prayer groups before, after, and after school. Just like anybody can form a chess club or drama club or anything like that. The voluntary actions, as they are not going to force their religion on anybody, because the people that are coming there are coming of their own free will. So therefore, as long as we provide the opportunity for everyone to form their own group, we are not in violation of anything there. Now, where student groups meet for non-religious activities, it must be allowed to be promoted and advertised just like any other group. So if the chess club or yearbook puts up posters saying that they're meeting after school at 3 o'clock by the North Gym, then the Christian prayer group can absolutely put up a sign saying we're meeting in the choir room at 3 o'clock, or we are meeting in the South Gym at 3 o'clock to pray for our fellow students or whomever. So we have to give equal access to advertisement as well. Group gatherings continued. We may not mandate or organize any religious ceremonies, even if you are wanting to organize your daughter's quinceañera or your bar mitzvah. None of that is able to be used if organized by the school. Now, if a school facility wants to be rented out for that, as long as we allow them to do that, that is perfectly fine. That is also why we are liable to have baccalaureate ceremonies, because those, of course, for graduates are optional if you want to go. If we allow anyone to use it, we must be able to allow any religious group to use it as long as it's advertised as a religious group. Which brings us into what are student rights in terms of religion in our building and what they should be. Of course, students acting on their own have the same right to engage in religious activities and discussion as they do to engage in any other subject. So if they want to talk about history, they can talk about history. If they want to talk with like-minded people about their faith, then they can talk with like-minded people of our faith. We cannot infringe on what they're talking about as long as it does not affect the school environment. Okay, they may pray before their meals or an assembly, on school grounds. I know, for example, I pray before every soccer game. That's perfectly acceptable. Students may not engage in harassment of others, and they may not bully others into believing that their religion is wrong or making anyone unwanted or feeling that they are outlined because they do not believe in a religion of their so choosing. Okay? And schools, of course, may not favor nor disfavor student groups based on their religious identities. Parents' rights. Of course, the Supreme Court has interpreted them as protecting the rights of parents to shape and control their education of their children. Of course, at the end of the day, the parents have the absolute and utmost control over where their children go to school. This allows them to have the opt-out issue. We discussed in a long detail of opting out, although for the benefit of what we do as a district, I think it's best to ignore the opt-out issue as of right now and try to focus more on the rights of parents to have their students in the classroom and not have the classroom teacher or any other avenue, being administration, staff member, custodian, anything, push their religious beliefs on the students. And they have, of course, the utmost expectation to send their students to school without having that be an issue. Teachers' rights. This is where it gets a little difficult for our staff members. When acting in their official capacities, of course, they cannot and will not show any favoritism towards any religion. They may not decorate their classroom with religious attire. It must be kept as a secular classroom. However, what they take part in on free time during their own time is, of course, none of our business, to be bluntly honest, as long as they are not and are very clear that they are not participating in any official capacities. I know as a staff member, I do go to see you at the poll, I go to things like that, and I make it very clear, and I do not practice any discipline issues at that point. I am a simple observer of the event. I am there to participate and not to punish and or take care of any discipline type issues, because that is a clear way for me to show that I'm not there in official capacities. Now, of course, that ends the portion I would give to the board. Now, correlation, of course, this role play activity allowed for a chance to deal with ethical and legal issues. I analyzed how the laws were established by trying and covering the law itself, including, which I gave a simple summary or breakdown, best way to analyze that. And I communicated with all stakeholders by covering a section for all the stakeholders, staff members, parents, and students. I found this assignment to be very relevant to my current learning, as it deals with aspects of how different laws affect the school realm. And it relevant to my learning is I live in Kansas, I work in Kansas, and we do deal with a lot of religion issues here in Kansas, as well as the fact that I didn't mention on this slide here, but I did teach at a private Islamic school here for several years in Kansas, and learned all about the differences in religions, and learned how to monitor and manage those issues. A reflection assignment will be helpful in dealing with any issues I may have in dealing with religion aspects going forward. It will be a nice reference point to look at and be aware of finding all of those sides before making a final choice. Lastly, there's my bibliography page. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day.